When the French Revolution began in 1789, the monarchy was overthrown. Yes, the monarchy. But why did the French Empire emerge afterwards instead of continuing the Republic as envisioned during the Revolution? Was it because the First Republic was too weak? Or was there a larger, perhaps hidden plan to expand and dominate the world under the guise of Republican ideals? Is this the only cause for the French Revolution, or are there other reasons why it remains one of the most studied and popular events in history? And Amisha asks a very fundamental question. Why is the French Revolution so famous? And why is it so deeply studied compared to various other revolutions? Right, the French Revolution. So, if you want to understand what caused the French Revolution, you have to go back to 18th century Europe, the age of what they call Enlightenment. You had great, towering, colossal figures like John Locke, like Voltaire, like Rousseau, fantastic people who came up with these concepts like individual rights. Rousseau came up with the concept of the social contract. What social contract? He said that there has to be a social contract, and this says that political power resides among the people, and governments should be based on the consent of the governed. So that should be the social contract. And out of this came the great principles of liberté, égalité, et fraternité, liberty, equality, and fraternity of all men. And later they brought in laicité, secularism. Yes. So all of these things, they created this gigantic ferment in society in Europe, particularly France. Okay. And this gave rise to the fantastic French Revolution, which was a decade of terror, 1789 to 1799, thereabouts. And, absolute reign of terror. Robespierre was one of the instigators and one of the major figures. He himself was off with his head. He himself was guillotined. Yeah. So it was that's what happened. And in the kingdom, the royalty, Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette, they were deposed, and their heads were separated from their bodies. They were divested of their heads during this time. So the French Revolution, you could say, was the first woke revolution of Europe. The old ideals, the conservative ideals, were thrown out of the window, and all these new liberal ideas came in, and that changed Europe forever, and that changed France forever. Even today, if you look at France, they kind of make fun of the royalty. When you had the Paris Olympics, Paris, you had the opening ceremony in which they were making fun of Marie Antoinette, weren't they? They were showing her with her head in her lap, and she's singing. The head is singing from the lap. They still make fun of the royalty. And the French Republic's ideals are the ideals of the French Revolution, even today. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, and they've added laicité. Now, who enters the picture? Well, a fantastic gentleman enters the picture. Napoleon Bonaparte, who was born in Corsica. Would you like to see where is Corsica? It was not part of France. It was part of Italy. Okay? It was part of Italy. Let me show you the map. We go to Europe, and we go to the Mediterranean Sea. And here we have Corse. It's now called Corse. It was called Corsica. And the capital is Ajaccio or Ajaccio. I don't know how they pronounce it, but whatever. This was the capital. And I believe Napoleon was born there or thereabouts. And his father fought the French. See, Italy sold this island to France, but the people of the island, they don't want to be part of France. They identified as Italian. So Napoleon's father actually fought the French, but then the French prevailed, and then he became an agent of France. Very smart tactical move. And he enrolled Napoleon in French military schools and all that. And Napoleon, well, he found the time over there very tough because he had a different accent and he looks different, and he intellectually was very different from the ordinary French student, and so on. And then the French Revolution breaks out in 1789, and Napoleon very smartly goes back to Corsica at the time, and he sits out the bloodiest portion of the French Revolution. So he was born in Corsica, and for some time he even flirted with the idea of going to the UK and becoming an officer in their navy. He had no actual loyalty to France or whatever, because he was rootless, because he should have been Italian. He was made to be French, and now he was like, I'll go wherever I can go. But anyhow, he went back to study in France, and eventually he became an officer in one of the French armies. And the first great thing he did was he was his action in the siege of Toulon. Now I could again open the map and show you where it happened, but I've done that in the past video. So if you are interested in the details, you can look up the siege of Toulon or Napoleon on my channel, and you will see that video in which I've shown the map and exactly where the entire action happened. But the siege of Toulon was a siege of the city of Toulon by the Royal Navy, British Royal Navy, and the navy had blockaded the city. Napoleon was able to end the blockade. 1790, first half of the 1790s. So that made Napoleon kind of famous, and he became a big deal. And then 1795, I think uh, there was a royalist uprising in Paris. Okay, and Napoleon ended the uprising by firing cannons at protesters. He called it a whiff of grape shot, a whiff of gunpowder. He fired cannons at a crowd of protesters and ended the royalist uprising, and that really rose his star. And eventually, Napoleon engineered a coup, the coup of 18 Brumaire, 18th of Brumaire, and he became the consul general or whatever. And by 1804, he was emperor of France. By 1805, he was emperor. He was king of Italy. So in about 19 years, he went from complete obscurity to becoming the emperor of France and the king of Italy. So he convinced the ringleaders, you could say, of the French Revolution, that the only way to preserve the ideals of the French Revolution was by making him the emperor and bringing royalty back. What a guy! What a guy! Yes. So that's what happened. That's essentially the story. Now, why is the French Revolution so famous and studied so much? Because it's been so influential in the small region called Europe, and the Europeans rule the world today via their various offshoots like the US. So even today, if you look at India, the Constitution of India, I suppose it makes some allusions to liberté, égalité, fraternité. I suppose the judiciary of India also talks about liberty, equality, fraternity, and all that. So it's been so influential. These are regarded as the highest ideals in a democracy and in liberal democracies and all that. So you could say it was the first, you could say, woke revolution, which overthrew the old conservative traditions that have essentially been at the heart of all human history for centuries, if not millennia. So that's why it's been so influential, and that's why it's studied so much.